This episode of Linux Action Show is brought to you by GoDaddy.com.
And by Ting.com. Head over to last.ting.com and save $25 off your first device.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 26, Episode 10. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey there, Matt. Should I tell folks about the big show?
Let's hear it.
All right, so this week we're going to talk about something I think some of you probably heard a lot about, Bittorrent Sync, and maybe something else you haven't heard much about, AeroFS. We'll cover both of those today with a special focus on Bittorrent Sync because there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in that world. Matt and I have been sharing folders over the week, and as well as one with the community, which has been pretty fun. So we'll give you our experiences on that and integrating it in with Linux, which is obviously key for this show. And then the news segment, we've got some great stories to cover, including Linux being the benchmark of quality, and why we might be hearing a lot from Gabe soon, as well as some big news from Ubuntu. And then we're going to have a little debate about some recent changes the Gnome project has made. And then at the end of the show, it's your feedback. And we've got even more stuff hidden in throughout the show. But to start, guess what, Matt?
What time is it?
Double picks time, Matt. It's double picks time. Ooh. That's right. We're doing double the picks this episode. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why, because I had specific problems I needed to solve this week, and then we also had some really good suggestions sent into the show. So boom, double picks week. That's right. Special episode of Linux Action Show. First up, our runs Linux this week. The Paris Metro Traffic Info System runs Linux. And this was sent in by Runs L358, and he's got a nice shot of, there it is, the Paris info system for transit purposes. How cool is that, Matt, right?
That's extraordinary. And what I like about it is that it's big. So it's not like it's a little screen saying, oh, it's a little Linux. Now, this is Linux up your grill.
Yeah, that is big.
It's like,
Yeah, there's no missing that Linux right there.
Oh.
I don't know if it's supposed to be displaying that, though, to be honest with you. It looks like an Air page.
Well, it's like HAL, off Space Odyssey 2000.
Yeah,
right?
At the bottom right there, boom. You know what it says?
Totally.
Kernel panic.
Everybody panic.
Yeah.
I would not. Now, I can't say I would ride public transportation during a blue screen or kernel panic because
that seems a little scary.
What's it coordinating? What's it operating?
I think it was Fedora. I'm looking at that. I think they're running Fedora.
Why.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. But you did.
Oh, I troll. They know that. They love them to death.
Okay, now
it's all good.
Matt, this next runs Linux. We're doing double picks, Matt. It's crazy.
Double picks.
And I had to make this next pick, even though it technically has been a pick before. I believe on the March 31st edition of the Linux Action Show. I don't know if that date math works out. But apparently, even though we covered it here on the Big Show, the world's largest Linux podcast, parts of the world still did not realize that the International Space Station is switching to Linux.
People were still unaware of this.
Man, we talked about it in the Big Show. I don't know how they missed it.
Well, clearly we need to yell a little louder this time so we really get the message out.
And this story is just too cool, so I wanted to make sure the word is out there. So we are shouting from the mountaintops. And this time we got a little more details than we had when I did cover it in the past. So this time we know it's going to be Debian, which is cool. The International Space Station has decided to switch dozens of laptops running Windows XP over to Debian. What Linux fans have been saying for years, that Linux delivers greater stability and reliability for public and private computing environments, resonated with Keith Cholovalina, the United Space Alliance contractor manager involved in the switch. Here's something that's kind of interesting. They're apparently still stinging from an incident in 2008 where a space station personnel where it made the space station personnel much more aware of viruses' ability to disrupt operations and what happens when you have a lack of support from the open source community. In 2008, the station computers were infected by Gamina AG, a virus after an astronaut brought an infected USB flash drive into orbit. The virus infected the computers on board the station.
Okay, let me bring this home for everybody. So, okay, you're in space. You're thousands of miles away from civilization. You're just doing your thing. Oh, hey, look, our only means of, breathing capsule thing has downloaded a virus. I mean, the mere thought of that to me is absolutely mortifying. I would go home, back to Earth. I would literally just destroy anything with the word. I would break all my windows.
Yeah.
Anything that even shaped like a window would be destroyed in my home. I would absolutely go on a panic strike.
I think the chat room might have nailed this one. Space porn. right? Right?
Yes,
Right? Like
yes.
their astronauts are like,
Agreed,
we're going to be up
agreed.
there for a long time, so bring a little space porn. And then the
Oh,
space porn
totally.
had viruses on it.
Huh.
This is even Linux is even great for space porn. This is what they've learned from that lesson.
Well, I'm going to give the astronauts a tip. Hotgirl.exe, not porn.
Right.
It's bad. It's bad. You don't want that.
You see,
no.
this is why you should join our chat room over at jblive.tv live Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific. Let me pull down the calendar here in my Unity bar, which is, by the way, 1 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. UTC over at jblive.tv, where we have the chat room embedded, or you can join us at irc.geekshed.net, #Jupiter Broadcasting, if you'd like to be a member of our chat room. And over on that live stream page, we've also got links for the audio stream as well as the HLS and RTMP. So if you want to plug it into Totem or VLC and don't want to watch it in Flash, you can do that over there as well. And there's stuff streaming there all the time. So even if you show up after the show, we usually have that week's show put up there pretty quick. So
We always have something here to entertain you. That's the
right.
important
That's
takeaway.
what we're all about. So there you go. There's your double runs Linux. Now I'm going to give you a double Android pick and a double desktop pick. It's crazy. This is
craziness.
Fun. This is
Double
actually
fun.
It's kind of exciting. All right. Well, before we get crazy with the picks, I want to thank this week's sponsor, GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com.
Woo!
Now, GoDaddy.com is always cranking out new features and new capabilities, but let's talk about the good tried and true .com. Folks, listen. Who else? What other shows do you listen to out there in the world? Probably none, where we have an army of people getting us good deals on these things, but nobody more important, sort of like our secret special agent, black ops operative to get us good deals, is Danica Patrick. But even every now and then, kind of like James Bond, you got to kick your special op into gear. Well, that's where my wife Angela came in. I don't know if you watched the last couple of weeks of the Linux Action Show, but my wife Angela walked up to Danica Patrick, pow! She socked the savings and Danica, knocked down the rates even more. So now when you're checking out over at GoDaddy.com, use the code Linux249 and get your .com for $2.49.
And she stores the savings in the gauntlet, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, that's exactly where it is. The savings comes out and it falls into the gauntlet using magnetics, Matt. Magnetics.
Okay.
Yep. And then when people use the code Linux249, those actually transfer via Bitcoin. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And then we go to a special exchange where .com savings comes out on the other end, and then it's delivered to each purchaser's inbox or shopping cart. It's really quite incredible.
So there's a whole intricate web of action going on in the...
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's why it behooves you to take advantage of that while we have that infrastructure in place. Linux249 to get a .com for $2.49. Or if you just want to grab something while you're over at GoDaddy for the first time, you want to take 32% off, use the code GO32OFF2. GO32OFF2 gets you 32% off anything on your order.
Good deal, good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to GoDaddy for supporting the Linux Action Show for a very, very long time. And thanks to all of you out there who continue to support our sponsors. That way they keep us going. We really appreciate that too.
We sure do.
And visiting those links in our show notes to any of our sponsors lets them know that you appreciate them and are paying attention. All right. Now that you've been helping us out by visiting our sponsors, we're going to help you out in maybe a work situation or an awkward social situation where you want to time something just right. Maybe you want to send a late night email to make it look like you're working, or maybe you want to send it like at 1 a.m. Say, oh man, I've been puking all night. I'm not going to make it in tomorrow, boss. Sorry. And you send that, but even though you're snoozing like at 9 p.m. Or maybe like you just want to time your tweets just right for maximum impact, Matt.
Well, here's an idea. I have it all figured out. It's like you want to give the illusion of that thing people are talking about, working, as they call it. I've heard about it. It really wasn't for me.
No.
So this whole idea that you can, throughout the day, during your naps, you schedule these things to go out to your boss with progress reports.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
That could be cool.
I like this. Yeah. So this is how you can do it from your Android device. It's called Schemes, Scheduled Networking, and it is a free app, and it's got a nice, very simple UI. I have it here on my Note 2. And what I love about Schemes is it ties in. Now, it only does Gmail for your email, by the way, just a disclaimer, but that's not an issue for me. But it also ties in with your Facebook and your tweeters. And once you set it up, you just go in there and you compose your message and you say, I want to, it'll do text messages too, which is nice.
Oh, yeah.
You go in there and say, you know what, at this time, send an email to these people telling them what's up. And then the phone just stores it in the background like a good little personal digital assistant should. And when that time is reached, it'll automatically send it out. And what's cool about this is it color codes the different services. So when you go to look at your reports, you can tell which ones are going to Twitter, which ones are going to email, and et cetera. Just by looking at the list there, you can see it. It's
a huge headache saver with the color coding. I was really happy with it. I've been playing with it since yesterday, and I'm definitely going to keep it installed.
Yep. So you can send scheduled SMS, Facebook statuses, tweets, emails, and more, all from your device. They're using the Holo UI, which is Google's kind of new, more flattened look that they're trying to push people towards. And you can also set up canned messages and things like that. So I've been playing with it for a couple of days, and it's fun. People are like, man, are you just up all the time? I'm like, yeah, man, I just work a lot. Yeah, man.
He does. He's actually a robot.
Yeah, there you go. So, why is the chat room looking at me? Chat room's laughing at us about something, man. I don't know what it was. All right.
I have no idea.
Second pick.
I think they're laughing at other chat activities, but who knows?
Sometimes my mouth says something that I don't even know what it said. I don't even, like last week on Plan B, I kept saying ASCII minor instead of ASIC minor. ASCII, ASCII. And so then we were, oh my God, Chris, don't you know what ASICs are? Oh my God. It's like my tongue.
I say it.
My mouth is
I'll
just,
say it wrong.
I have a dumb mouth, is what I'm saying. All right, now my second pick. Boom, Matt. Second pick this time. You ready for this? Now,
I'm ready.
Came in as a hearty recommendation via the subreddit, and we've also gotten an email on this. I have not tried this myself because I happen to be a Pocket Cast user, but check this out. It's called AntennaPod, and it's an open source podcast manager for Android 2.33 and above. And it's got some great features. It looks like it's got a good UI. Of course, you just can import your OPML feed, like if you're going to say get out of Google Reader. It has Flatter integration for your podcasts that have that in their feed. It does MP3 chapters, which is actually very nice, as well as Vorbis Comet chapters. And the UI looks nice. It's
very clean.
Yeah. I mean, it would look a little better with the Jupiter Broadcasting podcast in one of the screenshots.
Obviously. I mean, that's the missing dressing, I think, from this whole thing.
In fact, I don't think any of these podcasts that they have in these screenshots have ever talked about their app before. But this one has. That's just weird.
Yeah, maybe they'll change that.
Maybe. Anyways, but it is absolutely free. And like I said, it is open source. And it also has a little home screen widget. So that way, if you're like, have a shorter commute or something like that where you don't finish the entire podcast in one run, you can just unlock the phone and play and pause right from the home screen, which is nice.
Ooh, that's tidy. So it's features like that really make an app worth using for me.
Yep. And you could set feed updates in the background and all that kind of stuff. And it's cool just to see an open source app in the Google Play Store too.
It definitely is. It certainly differentiates from some of the other app stores out there that aren't so keen to do that.
It's ad-free as well, and he's got it up on GitHub, which is cool. And
very cool.
If you'd like to, if you are a Flatter user, he does have a Flatter address there on the page, and we'll have that linked in the show notes. So very nice. All right, Matt. There's our double Android picks. Now, what do you say we do our desktop picks?
Let's rock it.
I had a problem this week where I was troubleshooting some hard drive issues, and then we got into the Bittorrent Sync stuff, and I wanted to measure so in both circumstances, I wanted to measure how much throughput I was getting reading and writing to my hard drives.
Makes sense.
And I essentially wanted to know, I wanted to sort it by processes. I wanted to know, is a certain process thrashing my drive more than another process, i.e., is AeroFS thrashing the drive harder than Bittorrent Sync or vice versa, right? So I could try to...
That's interesting. Yeah, that would be detailed you really want to know.
So this is why I came across IOTop. IOTop, get it, like top. And it's a very straightforward program, and I'm absolutely positive it's going to be in your distro of choice repo, I would think. But here, I got it right here loaded up. So here is IOTop running on my machine if you're watching the video version. And it looks kind of like a simplified version of Top. And what's great is along the very top of the application is the total read and write of my hard drive. So I get
that's cool.
Yeah, so I get an overall snapshot and idea of what we're looking at. And then, of course, later on, as I launch something here, you'll see it kick up. So let's try that. Let's launch
a program. Let's see how it kicks up. One thing I really liked about it was that it's trimmed out in such a way that as you look from side to side, you don't feel overwhelmed looking at data.
Yeah.
And it's very clean.
So you can see, it's breaking down individually. I can see Chrome is using 900 kilobytes read from my disk. Here it's using 169, so I can actually break it down by the kilobytes and bytes per second these applications are using to read and write to my hard drive. And here I'm doing a Firefox update, and you can watch Firefox now. Oh, it looks getting 7 megs a second from my drive, things like that. So this was great when we were testing the Bittorrent Sync stuff to get an idea of how these programs can actually take advantage or don't take advantage of the drive's capabilities. So there you go. It's called IO Top, and it's very straightforward just for watching the top processes on your box and the disk throughput that they require. And it was, exactly what I needed and very simple, very straightforward. And of course,
well, there's not a lot of unnecessary overhead too, which I think a lot of folks will appreciate. There's not a lot of extra gunk.
It just gets you the info you want. Yep. I agree. Now, the next one that's a little kind of off that beaten path and it's a little more over the top. In fact, I don't even know if I had installed on this machine yet. Let me go get that real quick.
Yeah, check it out.
It's called, the next one I'm going to talk about is called A-Top. And here, let me do an apt-get because it's also in the repo. As you can see here, so I'm pulling it in right now.
Oh, okay.
And ATOP is just like IOTOP, where you can get sort of process information, but you also get you can get memory consumption information, you can get disk utilization consumption, you can get all kinds of like hardware level stuff. And here's some screenshots I'll show you while it's loading in.
So for data geeks, this would be just awesome.
Yeah, this is a big time data geek thing, and it's way more info in your face, like way more info compared to IOTOP, but it's kind of cool too. Like here, all right, so now I think you have to be root to run both of these, just FYI. So now
I would imagine so.
There we go, boom. So there is ATOP, and what's cool about ATOP is if I wanted to, I could hit D here, and now in the lower column, I'm looking at all of the disk throughput stuff, so I can see, and they're sorting by the top disk usage guys, and you can see that comp is 0% of my disk overall. That's good. And I can see Chrome right now is 95% of my disk use throughput overall, which is kind of neat, right? So I'm getting an actual percentage overall of all the things that are pegging your hard drive right now. 95% of that is going to Chrome, and right now it's just dropped down to 33%. And it has this same view, so that's drives, but I could also hit M, and now here's my memory breakdown. It's the same kind of thing. Meanwhile, all of the overall important stats like CPU and memory and network are all along in the top column.
Oh, that's nice. And I like how they broke everything down. You got a nice top section. You got a nice bottom section. Now, one thing I noticed in the screenshot, and perhaps you can answer this because I'm sure some of the audience is wondering as well. I noticed that there was kind of a color differentiation for like different columns and things like that. Is that something that's obviously, I know you can do that with the terminal itself. Was that done with the terminal itself, or is that actually a setting in the program?
Last time I saw that, it was like the root user had different colors. So I'm not sure how the colors work because I was thinking that'd be a neat feature. I mean, I know I can certainly tweak my terminal, but yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah. So that's ATOP, and there is like I see what you're talking about here when you're looking at the network utilization.
Yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool. It's like,
maybe here. Let me try it. So that would be what? Is that N to get network? Oh, it says now for me when I try to get network, it says kernel patch required. Ooh, I don't know. I don't want a kernel patch. Jeez, I don't know about that, Matt. Yeah, but I can see here in the screenshot we were talking about where they've got color under stuff. Maybe you can watch individual processes, and that's sort of a way to highlight them. That
would be very, very helpful.
I see. So to get that, you need the net atop module. So there's a kernel module you need to do that particular piece.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, I guess so. Probably needs the data from the kernel itself, right?
Sure, that would help.
Wow, how about that for double picks, Matt? Double picks.
Double pick.
Man, that's a lot of stuff. Now, we covered all of those, but we have them linked in the show notes. Just go find Season 26, Episode 10 of the Linux Action Show, and then scroll down below the video and the download links. And in the show notes there, you'll find all the picks and everything else we talked about. But Matt, with the picks all done, you know what it means?
What time is it? What does it mean?
I think it means it's time for us to do the news.
It's time for the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Matt, Ting is my mobile provider, and they are a no BS service. I love Ting.com. Check them out. They're an MVNO, a reseller of the nationwide Sprint network. So if you've got good Sprint service in your neck of the woods, you'll get great Ting service. Go over to Ting.com. Actually, go to last.ting.com and save $25 off your device. Let me tell you a little bit about them and why I chose them. First of all, no contracts or early termination fees. And I just like the peace of mind that provides me. And no bundling or ride-along services. You can choose from different sized packages, which are very easy and straightforward to go through. No add-on charges. You get voicemail, caller ID, tethering, hotspot, three-way calling, call forwarding, and all the other features you'd expect as part of the service. No add-on charges. And I'm talking about tethering here, people.
Tethering, I think the data is what really drives it home for me. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And they also have they have a bunch of other great features like fantastic control panels and things like that. And Matt, I've been kind of eyeballing the HTC One.
Oh, just a little bit.
Just a little
bit.
bit.
When you're not licking the screen and pawing at it.
So this is a great example why I feel comfortable buying from Ting, because these are contract-free devices. So if I buy this, I'm not renewing some sort of contract for 2 years. I feel like I actually own the device, like it's really mine. And these are brilliant, beautiful devices. And when you combine them with the power of the Ting service, with the tethering and the hotspot, and this super awesome management where you can control exactly how much data you're using and monitor exactly where you're at via their dashboard, it really is something else. And I keep being like every month at the end, I'm like, wow, this is it. This is all I have to worry about. This experience is incredible. And I want to recommend something to you. If you're maybe considering getting the HTC One or one of the other fantastic Android devices, like my beautiful Note 2. Hello, baby. Hello. Hi, Note 2. Hi. If you want to get the HTC One, if you're just considering it, check out what they have up on their site. Go to last.ting.com and click that savings calculator at the top of their website. Bring your old bill along with you and plug it in here and be marveled at the difference. Be marveled at the difference when a company isn't taking advantage of you. And you all know that the existing providers are taking advantage of you, and they're doing everything they can to get you on their bill. So go to last.ting.com and take control of it for yourself and help Ting change the mobile industry. They're already making a difference. I think some of you probably heard there's another big cell provider out there who's changing up a lot of the way their plans work. And it kind of reminds you of the way some of Ting's work, but not quite as good.
Yeah, it seems like they're kind of piecemealing little bits and pieces, basically the easiest things to do from it, but they're not really identifying the core
they're being
factors
dragged
that
into it. They're dragging into it. They're getting, and they're just kicking and screaming all the way, but they're not really getting it. They still have the hidden fees and the bundled charges. And one of the great things about Ting is they'll compensate you for how much you use or don't use. So if you go over, then you only get charged for what you use. And if you go under, they actually will credit you on your next bill for the difference, which is amazing.
Crazy.
That just blows my mind. That just makes it all worth it right there. So thank you to Ting.com. Go check out last.ting.com and go see what a brand new mobile service can really do. I mean, these guys, the people behind this are Two Cows. You remember Two Cows?
Oh man, yes, from way back.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. So they've always kind of gotten into an area and tried to disrupt and make it better. And
they're big players.
It's awesome to watch the free market work like this. So thanks to Ting, and go to last.ting.com. Matt, let's start with our first news story. It is some good news for the Linux folks out there. Linux is now considered to be the benchmark of quality. How do you like that?
Heck, I could have told you that, but it's nice to see it in writing.
The benchmark of quality. So this study's coming out from Coverity. They've called it the benchmark of quality in a newly published survey that they conducted during 2012, and they've just gotten it all put together and put the report out. The company annually brings together millions of lines of code from open source and closed source programs. I don't know exactly how they do that. They're not very clear in this article. Like, are they pulling up the closed source apart? Are they getting in some sort of licensing agreement?
Maybe some NDA action going on.
Yeah,
there.
I'm wondering, right?
Look and not tell. I don't know.
They say the accepted industry standard for defects is 1 for every 1,000 lines of code. So 1 defect for every 1,000 lines of code. Linux 3.8's 7.6 million lines of code has a defect density of 0.59, comparing quite well from the previous time they checked it, when it had a 0.66 density, and the time before that, where it had a 0.62. So its actual error density, even though the lines of code have actually gone up by, 500,000 almost, less errors. I think I think it was someone in the subreddit that actually pointed this out, where I was reading about it. It's a testament to the way open source software is being developed versus, what is it, the bazaar and the cathedral approach, the verses. Yeah.
And I think it's really a testament to that clearly this is a method of developing software that makes sense and that catches things and quickly addresses them rather than assigning them to a little closed room somewhere. Large group of people can get together and actually tackle this stuff head on.
I think
it's
you nailed
fantastic.
it. Yeah, I think you nailed it. And I think maybe as a result of this study coming out, there was a conversation thread that got started on Hacker News, and a Microsoft developer posted in there, and he did it anonymously. However, I guess he provided a cryptographic signature to prove who he was, from my understanding. And then he later deleted the comment off Hacker News, but somebody grabbed it because they thought it was fairly insightful and threw it up on their blog, and then somebody sent it to our subreddit, and Bob's your uncle, now it's on our show. And here's the headline. He says, I contribute to the Windows kernel. We are slower than other operating systems. Here is why. And at first I was like, this is a Windows story. It's not really related to Linux. It's kind of a negative Windows story, so that's kind of fun. But it's not, it's not really related to Linux. And I thought, it actually, though, when you read through it, reveals why there are some systemic advantages to the way Linux is developed, that these commercial companies, regardless of how disciplined they are, regardless of how many PhDs they have sitting in the desks, being super smart about code, there's some fundamental structure differences in the way these projects are done that sort of gives Linux this long-term advantage. And, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, even regardless of the fact that no matter how many millions of dollars they're throwing at it, it's still coming out on top. So Microsoft's dumping millions and billions and trillions and gajillions of dollars, and yet despite all that amazing amount of money being tossed at it, Linux is doing it with a minuscule amount in comparison. I mean, even with all the
distributed, right? Because you have IBM and Red Hat.
I mean, even with the big, huge, gigantic companies that work on Linux as well. I'm just saying, even with the money that they're pumping into the Linux Foundation and other related projects, it still pales, I think, collectively over the years into what we've seen pumped into Microsoft.
Yeah,
and so I really believe that. I really think it's efficiency.
And I'll just read a couple of quotes here now. Again, we don't really know if this is actually a Windows kernel developer or if it's just some dude claiming to be a Windows kernel developer. And the same supposed guy issued retraction where he watered down a lot of what he said, but a lot of this rang true. So I just want to read a couple of them. He says, I'm a developer for the Windows NT kernel, and Windows is indeed slower than other operating systems in many scenarios. And the gap is worsening. The cause of the problem is social. There is almost none of the improvement for its own sake, or for the sake of glory that you see in the Linux world. And I think that's a huge part, because the public open development model of Linux allows for this sort of public glory when you fix some nasty performance bug. He said, we started caring about security because during pre-SP3, Windows XP was an existential threat to our business. Our low performance is not an existential threat to the business. He says, component owners are generally hostile to outside patches. If you're a dev, accepting an outside patch makes your lead angry, because it also increases work time, pushes out the ship time, all that kind of stuff. He says it makes the testers angry because you make them more work. It makes your PM angry due to schedule implications of the new code churn. He says there's no incentive to accept changes from outside your team. You can always find a reason to say no, and you have very little incentive to say yes.
True. No, very true. I think it's interesting to kind of read and soak that in from their perspective. I know that morale at Microsoft, I know a few people that still work there, various divisions, and some that have told them to go shove it, that are no longer with the company. And I think that overall it's path of least resistance. And so I think that's beginning to really come home. I think the problems that stem back to earlier releases of Windows and and the kernel and all that sort of stuff are not only there, but I think they're growing worse. Their hiring practices, quite frankly, I see a lot of hiring within. And
he goes on to say they have like this issue where they either promote somebody internally who's not really qualified, or because of the brain drain issue and all the competition with Amazon and Google's Seattle offices and things like that, they're having a talent issue. And so the advantage to Linux is that when Google and a lot of other companies are competing to get talent and they bring them in-house and they take somebody away from Microsoft, a lot of times, even when it's a Facebook developer, they're working on some sort of back-end component that's open source. And so open source still benefits, even though that company theoretically has a monopoly on that person's talent and resources. The overall community still gets at least some percentage benefit from that, whereas when they work at Microsoft, they don't necessarily. So it's this interesting situation where Microsoft's up against these big competitors that are taking people and successfully winning these people over, and those people then also contribute back to open source. So it's sort of a double whammy to Microsoft.
A couple people also sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. A couple people pointed off. They said, well, you pointed out rather. They said that, look, it's not just the individuals that are contributing to the Linux stuff. It's also major companies, and of course, Linus is a millionaire and that sort of thing. And I hear what you guys are saying in the chat room, but I would also point out that I didn't say they weren't. What I said was collectively, dollars and cents being dropped into a singular collective, a singular bucket collectively from singular sources into a singular project. So if you look at the Linux kernel versus how much money's really put into developing the Linux kernel versus how much money's been put into redeveloping over and over and over and over, and usually retooling stuff and going in circles with the Windows kernel, I'm willing to bet overall you're probably going to see from start to finish over the course of years way more wasted money put into the Windows kernel than you would the Linux kernel, regardless of where it's coming from. I really believe that. And I'm not saying it's fact. I'm saying that's my belief. So, I don't know. Be interesting to find out.
One last note. He says, on the Linux kernel, if you improve the performance of a directory traversal by a consistent 5%, you're praised and thanked. Here, if you do that, if you do that and you're not on the object manager team, then even if you do get your code past the OB owners and into the tree, your own management doesn't care. And there's really, the only time they improve performance is when it's a feature set that goes on the box, because there's no reward system set up and no social recognition for it.
Yeah, there's zero motivation at all. It's truly about whatever's the least path to resistance.
Yeah.
So.
Gosh. Oh, it kind of makes you feel sad it makes you feel sad for the good talent that gets stuck in that situation.
I've seen good talent there, and I've seen some folks that have. It depends on where they worked and how long they were there as to where they fall into that category.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, well, this should be interesting. Pack your bags, Matt, because LinuxCon keynote has been announced, and this is going to be happening in September 16th through the 18th, 2013, at the Hyatt New Orleans in New Orleans. And LinuxCon, which has sold out every year since its debut, is the world's leading conference addressing all matters Linux for the global business and technical communities. And we have a couple of confirmed keynote speakers.
Oh, yeah?
Jonathan Bryce, Executive Director of the OpenStack Foundation. That's huge right now in the Linux server space. We're going to have Martin Frink, the CTO Director of HP Labs. Kevin Kelly, Digital Visionary and Funding Executive for Wired Magazine. And this one's the one I want to see. Gabe Newell from Valve. He's going to talk about the company's reasons for switching to Linux.
I think he's probably going to be the main attraction for a lot of people, especially the folks that really are into gaming.
Eben Upton from the Raspberry Pi Foundation will share his latest work on the popular technology. I wonder if we'll see news about a new Pi at LinuxCon. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be slick. Oh, man, that would be awesome.
So I want to go.
I wouldn't mind it. I just wish I could teleport it here.
Here's what we do. Okay, I did the math. All right, so we get a Kickstarter, all right, and we get it funded. That buys us the mobile rig, so that way we don't have to destroy the studio this time. And then we get out and we get a studio in a box, and then we leave from the Everett train station on Friday at around 11 a.m., and then we arrive Sunday evening in New Orleans, and we do segments on the way down on the train, and then we come back on Wednesday, and we arrive home Friday in the evening. See, I got it all planned out.
Oh, yeah, and I don't know about your wife, but my wife would be like, why am I not going? It's
they could come.
It's New Orleans. Okay, yeah.
Well, your wife. My wife, I don't know. She's pretty prego right now. I don't know.
Okay.
But I think that'd be so fun. I wonder if anybody's going to be streaming it, because if they're not, they should contact us and talk, because maybe, right?
Just saying.
Maybe they could
send
us.
It'd be cooler if they could hook us up with like a big, I don't know, like a gigantic super motorhome kind of situation.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. LinuxCon Action Mega RV, and we take the RV down to LinuxCon, and we stop along the way and like hang out with viewers in different states, and then we end up there and we stream it for them, and then we on the way back take a different route and stop with a whole other set of viewers. Huh?
I like that. And along the way, the whole way down, we will pull over into random cities and do phone checks to see who's running Android.
Right. We're going to be auditing. We'll be auditing. Excuse me, can we check your phone, please? Oh, this is old. You should probably get a new version of Android on there. Yeah. You can put Cyanogen mod. That'll take care of it. All right. So we're just LinuxCon, folks. We're just putting that out there. If you want the best Linux podcast in the world to stream from there, and you have either A, an RV, or B, a helicopter, maybe they could send the Linus copter. There's
that would be cool.
There's a Linus copter, right?
It's got to be shaped like a penguin, right?
What happens if some company needs a kernel patch right now? They send a Linus copter, right?
That would be awesome.
Okay. Let's talk a little Ubuntu news before we get out of the news segment. Just a couple of things that caught our eyes this week. Ubuntu might get a new simplified package format and app installer. That had to surprise a few people. According to a recent message posted on the Ubuntu development mailing list by Colin Watson, he's the installer team leader. Ubuntu might get a new simplified packaging format and app installer, which should make it easier for developers to get their software onto Ubuntu. This will target, at least initially, Ubuntu phone and tablet, but it should be usable elsewhere, even on non-Ubuntu systems.
I think this is great. I think that's awesome. But I have just another idea, kind of a cart before the buggy or horse before the buggy kind of thing. Let's throw out this wild idea of let's make the software center not run like crap on slower machines. I know it's a wild idea, but when I can load it 40 times faster in any web browser of any age in any universe and install it, just lickety split and install stuff, no problem. Why would I? Getting more software in a crappy software manager doesn't make any sense to me. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, and I was trying to be diplomatic.
I think what this is so you're right. I mean, the software center's got to be redone. I think they know that. I think what this is to make it easier for developers to deploy software on Ubuntu, because this is doing sort of like...
Right, and that makes sense. But again, it's like, hey, look, we got all this new software. It's awesome. You're still going to be punching yourself in the face when you're installing it, but by God, we got more software.
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
I think that's one of the reasons they're rolling it out on the phone and on the tablet first, because I think they're going to redo the UI to the store there. And Ubuntu Desktop is going to continue to use apt and debs indefinitely. And if anything, actually, in order to even use this installer system, you have to have Debian, you have to have apt-get running, because it has to go out and get dependencies to load the installer system right now. So it's not so much to replace it. What it is, it's like sort of like how PCBSD has the PBIs and then sits also on top of the ports tree. So you can still install from ports, but if you want to go to their website and download an installer, which has and all of the dependencies are self-contained. So the bad side about that is it means every developer has to update their libraries. You can't just do one system-wide update, but it also means things are less likely to break after an update, right? And a lot of developers for Linux are hard linking anyways these days. They're shipping their own libraries and everything anyway, so it's already happening in a large scale. And I think their idea here is they want to make something pretty straightforward for people to deploy packages on, and then just have a real simple install and make it a little more portable. But I agree with you, Matt. It's kind of like, if you don't give me a good way to get access to these, it's not really going to matter what you do.
Well, it's like saying, okay, we're going to give you the most amazing way to load groceries into your car. Granted, you ride a bicycle. And we understand that, but the way you load groceries into this car is just going to blow your mind, and you're going to be able to get all these great groceries in there. But don't worry, the bicycle will benefit somehow. We just don't know how yet. That's kind of what I feel like's happening. It's just kind of like, wait a minute.
Now this is all super early days. In fact, they're not even absolutely convinced they're not going to go with another solution to do this. I mean, they're still kind of kicking everything around in the developers mailing list.
I like the idea. I have no problem with it.
Their goal is no dependencies between apps. Right. Install each app entirely in its own separate directory.
I like that.
It's got, it's interesting because a lot of people in the comments are like, oh, this is going to be awful. I'm going to have 10 copies of the same library across my hard drive. And the argument is now just kind of moot. When you have terabyte hard drives and all of the memory in these systems, I think most average users would be willing to trade that 85 kilobytes of hard drive space to make sure that their apps don't break on them. And that's what it's coming down to. Now, I realize maybe that's not great for all of us who want to just have one library on the system and have the updater manage it. But for users, I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I love the message behind it and love the idea. And I've used, I wouldn't say this is a fair comparison, but it's kind of on the same approach. Click with a K, K-L-I-K, if I'm not mistaken, .de, or I don't remember which it is, but there's a couple of variations of that. Basically, these self-contained little OS 10 like packages, basically, to where there's just all one little deal, goes into one thing.
Oh, yeah.
And what's awesome is when you want to delete it, you take Mr. App, not folder, but you just take the app and it drag it to the trash and you're done. There's some benefits to that type of approach. And if it's going to end up being something similar to that, preferably not as exactly, but I would be fine with that, because that may then eliminate and may free up some resources to redo that whole software.
I think the reality is a lot of it is, how are we going to reliably distribute software on phones and tablets where a dependency problem on a phone and on a tablet is going to be a way bigger deal than when you're installing software on a desktop. And so they want to make that smooth and bulletproof. And it sounds like even right now, they're not even totally aiming to have this on the desktop just yet. Like, they're just trying to solve the mobile problem, and then if they get that licked and they get it working, then they're going to move it over to the desktop, and it'll just sit on top of apt.
Well, and to borrow a little something from the chef from Futurama to kick it up a notch, I would
Ooh.
say it would be cool if they could actually scan your hard drive and check for other apps that perhaps have some of those dependencies already available. And of course, then that minimizes how much is being put on. And
Yeah.
it really wouldn't be that big a deal to do for each installation. So then, for those of you that are worried about your small hard drives, well, if you've already got the dependencies, you still get that benefit. Not saying that would happen, but I would be willing to accept that. That'd be fine.
One last Ubuntu story before we get out of here. And this one's some good news for you, Matt. The Ubuntu Touch developers announced the first successful of Unity running on top of Mir. There you go.
Monkey suit.
So the battle continues. They've said the first run of Unity on top of Mir. It seems that Mir, which is of course, if y'all recall, the upcoming display server for Ubuntu, including desktops and tablets, has already started to move towards a stable version. Wow.
It's a start. We need to get it done, completed, and then we need to get it onto another distribution like OpenSUSE or Fedora or
That's
somebody.
where you're screwed.
Somebody, not Arch.
That's where you're
That would
screwed.
be cheating. Yeah.
That is where you're screwed. That's where you're screwed. All right. One last thing I just wanted to run past you. It's a little discussionary thing. Big dust up this last week. The Gnome team. This is the headline here that was sent to our subreddit, and I'm not bashing on Flipcoder. The Gnome team continues a failed strategy of removing features and ignoring users. The story hits the top of Hacker News. What will it take for Gnome developers to listen to their users?
Here's how I see it, and I'm not saying I'm pretty agnostic about GNOME these days. I don't really. I've played with the desktop. It's cute. I just don't care. Honestly, who cares? I mean, if people are into that desktop, that's awesome. But if they're not, why do we need to make it a big tinkling contest here? I guess I don't see
So
why.
here's what happened is I guess there was an update in GNOME 3.8. I have not used GNOME 3.8 yet, but I guess there was an update in it in which removed terminal transparency capabilities. There was no warning given to the users. There was no notification. It's just you install the update. Terminal transparency no longer works.
Oh yeah, that would piss me off.
A user goes to the
That's fair.
Bugzilla, says, "Hey guys, my terminal transparency's gone," and a GNOME developer. So he says, "Okay, here it is, right here." He says, "Step 1: open the terminal, go to profile settings." So he's given the recreation steps. He says, "Actual result. Background configuration tab is now missing. It was present in 3.6 versions. Please return it back." Christian Persch from the GNOME development team responds with, "No." And he closes the ticket.
Wow. Well, so this is an example of why developers and end users should never have conversations. And I say that with love because a lot of what I do for a living is I actually am the go-between guy between developers and end users. And I'm telling you from experience, those are conversations that are really, they're unpleasant to have.
That's
because
why there's guys
developers
like
are
you.
cold.
Yeah, that's why there's guys like you.
Well, I mean, I love to yap. And developers are like, well, that's stupid. You don't need it. Bleh. And that's kind of their approach. And the end user's like, no, you're just being a blankety blank. And so there's a breakdown in communication.
So,
developers don't want to be your buddy. They just want to get things done.
And so the community blows up and says, this is another example of GNOME removing features in the vein of some sort of OCD simplicity when they're actually just taking away features that users have loved for years, and they're completely not listening to us when we respond back, and they shut us down, and they're just on their own, Nazi design path, was kind of the response of the community.
Well, based on their feature description and based on the experience. See, that's the big thing is for an end user, it's an experience change.
Right.
For the developer, it's like, it was a little bit of code. Get over it. Quit crying. Wah. It was bloated or it was dumb or it was stupid or what the reason was. And so what is going to happen is some people will feel that they're being quote unquote Nazis about it. I look at it from honestly as an end user. If you have that big of a problem with it, shop for something else. You didn't pay for it. Quit crying.
Yeah,
I mean,
there is
really.
that, right? It is, there is like you didn't pay for it, so it is a little weird.
Jeez.
I guess, so the backstory to this, from what I understand, and this is just my rough understanding of the situation, is, they've been moving away from gconf in GNOME 3.x, and this terminal transparency setting was dependent on gconf for the terminal. And I guess it was like the last thing that the terminal emulator needed for gconf. And if they could get rid of this, then the terminal emulator was completely broken free of all gconf dependencies, and they could move forward in an overall goal. And I guess the thought process was that then later on they could come back and come up with a way to add transparency via a different mechanism.
Right.
And I guess this was a conversation they had internally on their IRC. They pulled their IRC users, everybody voted to do it, and they took action. There was never any proper communication. And I guess the problem with the no response was this was like the third or fourth time the bug had been opened. And I guess the developer was just sick and tired of explaining himself over and over again. Instead of just marking the bug a dedupe and referring to the other bugs, he just kind of got grumpy cat about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I wondered, Matt, is it speaking to some overall kind of pent-up anger at GNOME?
Yes and no. I think in general, my open source users, the end users specifically, are probably more passionate than the people that go to Best Buy to buy the latest copy of Craptastic in the box or whatever the heck app they're buying, right? So, they're very passionate because with open source software, they feel like they are involved, not just as users, but they're passionate about the development of it. Like you with Gary, for instance, it's a great example. You're deeply passionate about where it goes. And so when someone within that community does something boneheaded, you kind of take it personally. So I get that. Now are users going to start really railing on GNOME about their decisions lately? I think it's possible. I think it's beginning to happen because I think GNOME is definitely taking an Ubuntu approach and saying we know best. We're doing it this way, but that wasn't always the case.
I don't know if I agree with you though, because they're also in some ways capitulating with the GNOME Classic mode, where they're creating this interface that has a menu, it has bars that you want. They're bringing back the minimize and maximize buttons.
It's like they just got back from KFC. They got a big old bucket of chicken. They've cleaned off the bone, and they're throwing the bones at the people that want the legacy experience. That's what's going on. There's bones going on, kids. I'm just saying.
They're
getting boned, for lack of a better description.
Here, let's just make the kids quiet for a little while. Maybe you're right. Yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
That's my feeling on it. I mean, I feel like they're getting bone thrown down.
I guess.
So, they are certainly kind of half-assedly throwing some features back in their face, but it's not because they care. It's to it's kind of like turning down the squelch on your walkie-talkie,
Yeah, you're right. It is. And it's funny because this week a new version of Cinnamon came out. And just at a point where I was kind of thinking, gosh, maybe with some of these capitulations GNOME's making, Cinnamon's becoming less and less relevant. And then you realize that it really does harm to no one to have these multiple projects going. And as a user, like you were saying, maybe it's just time to jump ship if you're not happy. I did. And I say that thinking long-term, like if I was a betting man, I think long-term, GNOME's going to be after another year or so, is going to be in a really great place. But for now, right now, it's still, for me, I just don't think it's there yet. I'm giving it time.
Well, and the biggest factor about the desktop environments in Linux is this isn't OS 10. It's not one size fits all. It's not like you only have one choice.
Yeah.
And more importantly, because of these desktop differences, I get to come up with really crazy, cockeyed, sideways analogies that sound like I've got, just completely cracked out on something and came up with all these ideas. And it allows me to really verbalize my passion for these desktops.
It is fun in a way. It is fun.
Yeah.
Even when they're upsetting us, it is still kind of fun. All right, so there you go. We'll have links to all those stories in the show notes. But Matt, that's all the news for this week. All right, Matt, it is time to talk about Bittorrent Sync, possibly the future of synchronizing files across LANs and the internet. And both you and I have a special excitement for this particular technology. And something else we have a particular excitement for is our segment sponsor, System76, creators of machines born to run Ubuntu. Now, Matt, I could sit here and I could tell you about how, I love my Bonobo, and how this weekend I was running Dropbox, AeroFS, and Bittorrent Sync while playing video games, and didn't even miss a beat. And
love that.
Yeah, that was especially impressive when I was doing some real hard testing, and it was still running just great. I love my Bonobo. And we got an email from a viewer here, Cal Exclusive, who said, "Hi, I'd just like to say I bought a domain using the Linux code." Thank you, sir. He said, "I'd just like to tell you about my story, how my cheapness punished me. I've been wanting to get a laptop for some time, and every week you talk about System76, and I'm reminded of this. So for the last month, I've been weighing the pros and cons of a System76 laptop versus one with Windows preloaded and a student discount. This is the thing. Anyway, I ended up cheaping out, and I got a lower quality machine, and now I have a laptop with an unsupported wireless network card. Luckily, I have a Wi-Fi dongle lying around, and I have to carry that around."
Because nothing looks cool in 2013 like a dongle sticking out of your laptop, right?
He says, "I guess you could use my story next time you plug a Linux supporting vendor sometime. Great show." And It was great to see some emotions last week. Wow, I guess we gotten upset last week. You know, isn't that true though about System 76? Is it's just out of the box, hassle-free, and it's not just with Ubuntu too. There's other operating systems you can load on there that will run just fine as well. I won't say what operating systems those are. I will let you draw your own conclusions. But go check out System 76. Get yourself a nice machine, a desktop, a laptop, even a server, and tell them the Linux Action Show sent you.
And you know every time, every Ubuntu release, you know it's going to work.
You know
because
it.
They've tested it.
You know it. All right, Matt,
Definitely.
let's talk about Bittorrent Sync. And
yes.
A lot of you are familiar with standard old BitTorrent, probably how you download a lot of your ISOs over the day. Well, the same folks behind BitTorrent over in their labs section have come out with this new sort of Dropbox killer that allows peer-to-peer syncing without a server. So there's no Dropbox cloud, right? There's no EC2 backend. And this is kind of key because what we've discovered, if you're a TextNet viewer, you already know this, is that it has come out that Dropbox uses one shared key for the encryption across all of their storage. So with one key, they can decrypt anybody's Dropbox contents. And of course, when somebody comes along with a warrant or is doing, at some point when somebody says, you know, Dropbox, we'd like to work with you to integrate in our copyright scanning system, just like YouTube has. That way we can automatically scan the contents of everyone's Dropbox and identify copyright material and notify the user of their mistake. I'm sure that's going to happen at some point, and I hate that idea. And I don't know, and I just, that kind of uncertainty leaves a sour pit in my stomach, Matt.
It's putting a lot of trust in. I mean, you call that security. That's kind of laughable. One security key. I didn't know that. I knew it was bad, but wow.
Yeah.
If that isn't an argument for checking this out, I don't know what is, because that's terrible.
Absolutely. So it uses the BitTorrent protocol, and it combines that with a bunch of really cool technology to make this happen. So it's available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. We'll talk about that a little more in just a second. And you then just choose which folder you want. And one of the things that's different than than Dropbox, is it can be any folder on your system. It's not a designated Dropbox folder, and only the stuff inside this folder is going to be synced. Anything outside, unless you symlink it, you're screwed. No, it can be any folder, multiple folders on your hard drive, better or worse. We'll talk about that in a little bit, why that can also be a bad thing, but that's one of its advantages. It uses this really obvious, in some ways, crypto secret key system. So you can share a secret key with anyone. They plug that into their Bittorrent Sync client, and now they're syncing with your folder. And they have one-way keys where they can only read the contents of your folder, and then there's two-way shared secret keys. Matt and
I like.
you and I were playing with this. We had a shared key, and we were throwing some stuff in a directory and tossing some big files back and forth, some small files back and forth. Handled it all like a champ.
Well, one of the first things I realized how easy, once you get it set up, is there's really nothing to it. Really, it's just install it and you're done, and go to the localhost. But one of the things I found most interesting is that you can share, instead of like having a public URL, quote unquote, you can have a read-only read-only key, or actually a full-on key that someone can actually take that key and have back and forth access. And how easy it is from one window to make that happen. Yeah. There's not a lot of jumping around. I was really impressed with it.
Why don't I? And one thing they also have, which I like a lot, is a one-time secret. So you can it's the same thing. You can give out this one-time secret, and then the person has 24 hours to use it. And if they don't use the key within 24 hours, it expires, and they're not able to sync up with your BitTorrent Sync anymore. So I've got it on a couple of boxes here. I've got it installed locally, and I've got it installed on a remote machine here. So I'll get it running here locally. Now on Linux, this is all kind of still in more development on Linux. On the Windows and Mac side, there's a full-fledged GUI client.
Yeah.
On the Linux side, you download one particular binary. I think there's also a PPA I've linked to in the show notes. And then once you've downloaded it, you just go run it on the command line. So you got a few options. Like, so here, if I go, it's just the BT sync command. And if I run this and I do a -- help, one of the things I'm going to do, just so that way you guys can see it, is there's a -- no daemon mode. So that way it stays here in the foreground.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so we'll do BitTorrent Sync -- no daemon. And then it keeps running here. And then this is the part that I think kind of throws people a little bit, is it just runs. There's not like an applet that shows up or anything like that. So then you just go to your local host, and
and I think once they understand that, it really isn't. It's not as I would say, it's not rocket surgery.
Right.
Just make a shortcut, easy, click into it. Bam, there it is.
So there you go. So my first time running on this machine, I go to localhost :8888, and then it says, "Hey, do you agree to our policies?" And I say agree. And then here is my first BitTorrent Sync setup. Now, one of the other things that BitTorrent Sync does is it's not just peer-to-peer over the internet syncing. It's also killer at LAN syncing. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
this hands down is where it trumps Dropbox single-handedly. So I will now run it on my other remote system. I'm starting it up right there. And now I will go over to that box right here and pull that up. So this is another computer in my house network. So now I've got 2 boxes, and I've got several shared folders on this remote computer, including the one that I set up with you and another one that I got off of the web. And there's these, because it works around these shared keys, there's now these public posting. I linked to one in the show notes, 12char is what it's called, 12char, I don't know, where people just post their secret. And they just start stashing stuff like, here's books on statistics, of course, there's the porn, there's the obligatory porn that are going to be, here's Arduino books for, here's the New York Times bestsellers, of course, I'm sure that's not legal, but people are publicly posting their keys, and then people can rate them, they can leave comments, so you can go in here and read about the comments of that. I mean, so you can see where there's sort of this whole window of possibility that opens up. But if we go look at my LAN machine here, you can see I've subscribed to some public books ones. And here I have this last 260 folder that we made. And I put this out on the internet and I said, hey, everybody, let's all share this folder for this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. And if I say get secret, I'm just going to grab the secret right here. I'm going to copy that. And I'll go over to my local Bittorrent Sync that I have installed on my local computer. I'm going to say add folder. Okay, and I've already made a folder. So I go in, I put it in my home directory, and I called the folder last 260. And I paste the secret in here from my other machine, and I say add. Bob's your uncle. It goes out just like a Bittorrent Sync client. It actually can communicate with trackers, just like an actual Bittorrent Sync. And there's also local network discovery. And now it'll go out and it's syncing with all of the other people who are sharing this folder peer-to-peer. So it's pulling it from my local box. It's pulling it from Matt's house right now. It's pulling it from our audience out on the web that are watching us right now. And if I open up my folder and I go into the last 260 folder, you'll see it'll start populating once the sync starts setting up. It'll just start populating immediately with the files. It's really compelling and it's really fast.
And I also like any good BitTorrent client, you have you can throttle, upload, download. Very important for me. Definitely like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily want it to eat up all my resources.
And
so that's pretty happy with it.
That's a good point to touch on right now. I think is there is the problem we had. So we made this a public BitTorrent sync, right? So we said I posted on G+ and on our subreddit and said, here's the secret. Add this to your BitTorrent sync, and then just add whatever you want to the folder. Just don't be creepy.
Exactly.
Now, because BitTorrent Sync allows you to add any directory on your computer, not just the Dropbox folder, you can add the directory that also has the cache for everything that's in the sync folder. Just like other sync programs, BitTorrent Sync has a metacache folder that caches what's in and out of that folder, and you can delete and recover from that. Well, if you put that folder in this folder that's being synced, every time the folder is updated, the cache gets updated. Then the cache gets updated, so the folder gets updated, so then the cache gets updated. And it creates this update sync cycle. So somebody out in our audience did that, and it has been slamming my systems. Now, I've let it continue because it's been an interesting experiment to watch how the BitTorrent Sync client kind of behaves. And it's
exactly, and how it reacts and what your options are.
Yeah, like how hard does it hit my system? And it's actually, from a system resources standpoint, been pretty manageable. It hasn't been a big deal. However, my FiOS Action Tech router, or actually I think it's a Westel router.
Oh, yeah.
It has completely been blowing up my router. And I have this problem sometimes when I'm doing a lot of torrenting where it just opens up so many connections. It's not an actual throughput issue as it is a number of connections issue. This has that same problem. So if you have ever been in that boat where your router gets wonky after you've been torrenting for too long, you could potentially have this. Now, before that person put their metacache directory in the BitTorrent Sync folder, it was awesome. I mean, stuff was just flying in and out of there, like no problem, very minimal system impact. And what's so cool about it is everybody who has a copy of the files helps new people sync up. So it's not all just coming from my machine, even though I'm the one that created the original shared folder. Now everybody has a copy of it. So just like torrent file downloads, everybody's distributing the files now. It's pretty nice.
Exactly.
All right, let's see if my BitTorrent Sync here has caught up. Let's see if it's still going. There we go. Oh, so first thing it's gotten and pulled the metacache directory that somebody's put in there.
Of course.
It'll work on that for a little bit. But you can see here, you can see it breaks out who I've connected to. Of course, I'm displaying their IP. Sorry about that, guys. Should have thought of that. Hopefully you don't get DDoSed. And I can see exactly who I'm pulling from.
Especially after putting them in a cache.
Although they kind of deserve it. They kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was an accident, so we're sorry.
Yeah.
We're sorry.
Well, a little bit. You can see I added a README full, and here comes in the music folders, the pics directories, and all of these are pulling from folks on the web. How awesome is this?
That is very cool.
Yeah,
what a cool collaborative way of sharing folders.
Well, you could do something like this where you could say, every week, an episode of the Linux Action Show is going to have a shared secret folder. And everybody just throw in screen grabs, music, memes, related articles, MP3 files of everything that could possibly be related to this episode of the Linux Action Show. And then anybody could just add that secret to their Bittorrent Sync program, and they could pull down all of the relevant information. And you could include episode files in there. You could have, the video files in there, because over BitTorrent, it's distributing that syncing. It's really not a big deal.
Collaborative video editing without all the headaches and frustration of getting large files back and forth.
Well, this is why I came across it, because you and I had the problem with the Linux Fest Northwest clips where you got sick and you had the video clips on the SD cards.
Yep.
And I wanted to be able to edit them up and get them ready for that week's episode. And, neither one of us were in any condition to travel. Nope. And we couldn't Dropbox them to each other because they would have exceeded the Dropbox capacity just in the clips on their own. Right. So we were looking for some way for you and I to very simply just put some files in a directory and then have it show up on both of our computers. Exactly. And that's where we went down the path of looking at AeroFS and Bittorrent Sync. And Bittorrent Sync, I'm very, very, very bullish on it, except for one major drawback.
What's your drawback on it?
Closed source. It's based on the BitTorrent protocol, right? So in theory, somebody could write an open source front end around it.
That's true. Okay, now that's pretty good. That's a good point.
I would, this would be the silver bullet. I mean, open source developers could integrate this into their application at an app level and then sync settings across all of your machines. Because there's no service there's no cloud service that can go down and take your app offline. This is something we've talked about on Coda Radio, where you write an application that depends on the cloud, and then EC2 or GitHub or Azure goes offline, and then your app doesn't work.
Exactly.
Whereas this doesn't have that issue.
And as people have pointed out, someone said, could the feds get the code? Well, the bigger issue here really is that another company, somebody's creepy, maybe another company buys out somebody with a creepy privacy policy, whatever the circumstances may be, you really don't know truly what's going on with the source code if it's not open. You really don't. No one truly trustworthy is auditing that. So, you kind of care about stuff like that.
And if the license was such that people could bake it, imagine Gnome baking this into the sync framework or anything like that, because then you could have Nautilus with built-in file synchronization across all of your Gnome desktops or whatever. And the other downside, although they're working on this, is there's no mobile app yet. Right.
True. So,
and I kind of use the hell out of that with Dropbox, because I'll put some MP3s in there or something like that. And I'm like, I want to go get, or a picture or whatever it is. Or you can save to your Dropbox. I do that all the time. I'll take a picture and I'll use the share to Dropbox feature. So that's kind of a big downside too. Although I guess they're working on that.
That would be nice to see. That would be a very cool feature. And I still think it's totally worth it. I think in many ways it's simpler than I expected, much simpler than I expected. I was rather shocked. And once they actually get a little, some sort of a built-in app, GTK or Qt or whatever it may be, something that can kind of sit next to the clock, I'd be really happy with that. But, even as it is now, I would use the hell out of it.
Yeah, and, I think you should...
With a basic understanding.
I think I want to underscore your point there. When I saw this shared secret system and all that, I thought, this is way too complicated.
Right.
This is not, how do I tell somebody over the internet without being able to use their computer how to set this up? But then I realized it's just they make it very easy to copy the secret. So you just go in there, when they have the desktop client or in the web for Linux, you just copy the secret, and I just pasted it up on Google Plus and said, here, have at it, folks. And they were able to just grab it. So it was actually turned out to be a lot easier to share with Bittorrent Sync than I thought. Anyways, we have more resources in the show notes. You can go check it out. They got other features that are really cool, like one-time sync. They're working on BSD versions, so that way this will work on FreeNAS. They've already got it running on PC BSD. Imagine nice. 2 FreeNAS or 2 file servers. You could do this with the Linux version right now with their web UI, which actually is very simple and straightforward. You could set up 2 Linux file servers or 2 FreeNAS servers and have them sync between each other. And
two quick questions before I forget.
Yeah.
Just talking about that, when you're talking about doing something freelance. First of all, traffic I assume is secure back and forth.
Yep, it's encrypted.
It's encrypted, so that's protected. And then number two, I wonder how this would compare on a LAN in comparison to other file sharing technologies, Samba, NFS, whatever. I mean, like as far as speed and things of that sort. It'd be kind of interesting to see.
I think I don't know about
it. Probably wouldn't quite match up, but it'd be kind of fun to try.
Well, I'll tell you, speed-wise for local LAN copy, it is kind of astonishing. It transfers everything in 4 megabyte chunks. So if you have something that's under 4 megabytes, it goes over faster than the file manager can refresh the directory. That's how fast it moves over. And then when you have files larger than 4 megabytes, it moves them in 4 megabyte chunks extremely fast over the LAN. I copied in some outtake clips into the shared directory, and I moved them into the folder, and then I went over to the other computer and just brought up the file manager, and they were already there. It was just instantly. It was for the
wow.
It uses a LAN discovery protocol where if you have a bunch of Bittorrent Sync clients on the local network, they all automatically discover each other if you turn it on, and set that up, and then they figure out they can communicate over the local LAN, and they don't ever even bother going to your router. So it's all just point to point inside your internal network, and it's just super fast.
I might be using this more and more. I mean, I was playing with it, today and yesterday, but I think I'm definitely going to be using this a lot more.
Yeah, it is. It is really. We talk a lot about your own, creating your own cloud, getting off of these third-party services. And one of the things they point out is even though this sucker is closed source, the way it is built today, it can run indefinitely as is. They can never shut anything down to turn it off. There's no there's no master kill command or anything like that. As long as you have the code today, it'll run forever. There's no services that can shut down or anything like that. So it's pretty compelling. And it's a little on the underbaked side on the Linux side, but it's so close. And if you don't mind going to the command line and starting a binary and then going to the web browser and going to port 8888 on your local host, if you don't mind those particular things, it's ready to go today.
So I think from an end user point of view, the real appeal is, granted, this is not Samba or NFS. This is not a mountable file setup kind of situation. But if you're just end users want to share files, they don't get into most people, average Joe, doesn't care, especially non-Linux folks. They don't give a rat's butt about all that. They just want to move file A to file B on the other PC. Yeah. This is a really slick way of doing that, especially if you're working with home movies or you're working with editing audio or things like that. I think this is a really compelling option.
I think for podcasters where they do double-ended recordings or they have clips they want to share, I think this is the way to go because you have the storage limitation is your hard drive space and your bandwidth. Yeah. And the bigger the group you have that you collaborate with, the better the file transfer speeds, which is really cool.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. So we'll see where this goes. It's something to definitely keep an eye on. Bittorrent Sync, I think, is going to be a disruptor once they get all the little kinks worked out. And maybe sort of like we have uTorrent, which is closed source, but then there's a dozen really good BitTorrent clients that are open source. Maybe we'll see that same thing happen with Bittorrent Sync. Then maybe we'll start seeing it included in distro repos, and then it could really start to happen. So we'll see. Anyways, I didn't get a chance. We had some people that that made some really funny videos and pictures and stuff that they included in the sync. So if we have time at the end of the show during the feedback, I'll try to. I'll let it sync. The problem is it happens immediately, except for that metacache directory is so huge that it's got to sync that big thing.
Right.
So that would be my tip after using this for a little bit is if you collaborate with people, make sure. So one problem is I can't go in there and just revoke that one person's access. I can't go in there and say this person can't use the sync anymore. I have to revoke the entire key. Now I can do that, right? But then
that's kind of overkill.
It breaks the whole thing. Yeah.
It kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So what they need is to actually, in addition to the existing key selection you have, you also need quite frankly, a user keys.
Yeah, and they have one-time keys, but it's the same thing. Like it'd be a one-time key for that folder. It's So this is one thing that I think maybe they could, if I could go in there and explicitly say, this user no longer has access to the folder. And maybe there is a way to do it, and I'm just doing it wrong. But like when I look at their admin UI for it, I don't see it. So
it's pretty minimal. I certainly didn't see it.
So. Yeah. So all right. Well, I probably shouldn't show their IPs. I bet they probably wouldn't like that very much. But it's very cool. Anyways, Matt, that's the Linux Action Show's look at Bittorrent Sync. Don't be surprised if we talk about it again in the future as they make some major developments and as we start seeing it integrated into some of our favorite open source projects. If that happens, we'll definitely be talking about it then. But Matt, let's go talk about AeroFS. In this week's segment of Slash Etsy, we're going to talk about AeroFS, an alternative to Bittorrent Sync and Dropbox, as well as SparkleShare and a few others. And it's actually pretty compelling because, again, it doesn't require on a cloud surface. It's machine to machine, as well as a very interesting mix. But before we get to that, I want to thank this segment sponsor, Untangle. Go to untangle.com and check out what they are rocking. Now, if you're not familiar with Untangle, this is a firewall appliance that runs on top of Linux. And what they're doing cool is it's a combination of either a hardware device or an ISO image that you can download and load on your own machine for absolutely free. And it's got a fantastic GUI on top of it all to manage it. Sort of a rack-like inspired interface that is very easy for either you, a pro, or somebody who might be new to the Linux scene and firewall management to manage. Of course, choosing an edge of the network device is a really big commitment. It also takes money and your resources, so Untangle wants to earn your trust. That's why they make the ISO available for you to download. No credit card needed, no commitment to buy. You just check it out. And then later on, if you're trying it and you say, you know what? Gosh, this Untangle is pretty neat. I'd like to throw in some support packages, some standard software packages, like maybe their policy manager, their VPN manager, their premium web filter. That's great for a lot of businesses.
Oh, yeah.
Use the code LAST20 when you're getting the software package, and guess what? Take 20% off your entire service package. It's pretty great, right?
I like that.
So thank you to Untangle for supporting this segment, for sponsoring this segment, and go to untangle.com and use the code LAST20 when you check out and save some money on the Untangle services.
Big thanks to those guys. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Matt, you and I were playing with AeroFS actually before we got to play with Bittorrent Sync.
Oh, yes.
And I actually thought AeroFS might be the easier of the two. I don't know if that's really true.
Well, let's go back to our email exchange when we first got started with this.
Yeah.
I think you probably remember that.
Yeah.
My whole thing is, I went to go and share something, and I was like, all right, it's cool. And then you're like, oh no, hey, I got the thing to share. It's like, oh, okay. And the UI was kind of,
Vague in some areas.
Yeah, I wasn't really finding the flow to it. Once you get it all figured out, we finally figured out who's inviting whom and whatever, all that sort of stuff. It was pretty damn fast.
I think once we got that figured out, and I agree, that was kind of whereas with Bittorrent Sync, you just, here's the shared secret, plug this in, it's very straightforward, it's very obvious. But one of the things AeroFS does that is kind of cool is they have this whole team collaboration aspect to it. So I created a team, and then I invited you to my team, and I made you an administrator, and then once you get invited to my team, you automatically get our team folder. Now, remember, none of this is going through their services or anything like that. They do have sort of like a service that sits on top of it all to kind of make the connections happen. And because of that, they're also able to offer a web UI to your sort of like a universal, sort of like when you log into Dropbox, you get a universal access to your cloud storage wherever you're at. Bittorrent Sync doesn't really offer that because you just have to go to the web UI it provides. That's on each local box, whereas this, you go to the AeroFS website and you can actually log in. And when you're in here, you can create these teams. And so I made a team with you, and we're the only two people in there, but I can always invite more. What's really cool about AeroFS, though, and I really like this idea, Matt, is I was able to add I guess they call it a team server for AeroFS. It's available for Windows or Linux. You download the server, and it becomes your cloud storage, your master cloud storage for all of the systems that sync with it. And what's really neat about this is it can either use the local storage on your box, so if you've got terabytes of space, your master server can be on your file server, and everybody will sync to that, and everybody's master copies go there, what's really nice. There's also an option to have that master storage be on Amazon S3. You set up your own S3 bucket, you plug that in there, and then AeroSync server pulls everything to your master server, caches it locally, and then saves a backup copy to your own private encrypted Amazon S3 bucket. I believe it uses AES 256. It's
pretty strong.
Yeah, with a 2048-bit RSA encryption key. So it's super encrypted, and it's very fast, and it gives you a little more control. Like I could, in that team group setup, I can explicitly remove you. So if you were spamming my folder with something, I can go in there and turn you off, which is nice, right? And the other thing that AeroFS has, which I think you might like this a little more, is it offers a GUI client, right? So you can actually go in under Linux and set up the different, options. You can do selective sync and say only sync the certain things in these folders. You can limit the bandwidth just like you can in Bittorrent Sync, but again, all this is available through a GTK GUI.
And I really like that. One experience, because I had installed it on an OpenSUSE box, and so it was a very different experience from what you had as far as installing the deb on Ubuntu. It was actually reasonably painless, and of course, the way it installed on my OpenSUSE box, it'll install on any Linux box, reasonably easy. A couple dependency issues, not really a big deal. Took a couple seconds to track down, but for the most part, it was almost as simple as it would have been on Ubuntu, and that really made me happy.
And when the sync started, so the little icon has like these little clouds that move up in the tray. And when the sync started, you and I were syncing big video files, AVC HD files. And these
was awesome.
These are like the most challenging things for these services to sync because these things are already compressed to hell, right? So it's not like it can shrink them down and get a lot more out of it. But it did pretty good. I mean, we started getting the smaller files within like 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, it was ridiculous. In my opinion, it was ridiculous fast compared to other cloud type, I say cloud services, to other, cloud type sharing situations. It's really was quick.
I think it makes a difference kind of compared to Dropbox because in the Dropbox setup, you upload to the Dropbox service, and then from the Dropbox service, you download to the remote machine. So if we were sharing these clips, you would have first put it up there, and then it would have gone up to the Dropbox service, which is, fairly fast, and then from the Dropbox service down to my desktop. But with both AeroFS and Bittorrent Sync, our machines are connecting directly to each other. The difference is the Bittorrent Sync system uses the peer-to-peer protocol and torrent trackers to do that, where it's AeroFS, their service acts as a broker, but otherwise there's nothing passing through them. And so that's why you can do terabytes of data if you want because there's no shared storage. And because we're going directly to each other, as soon as Matt starts transferring the bits, I start getting the bits. So it's just even that much faster than Dropbox.
And we were talking over Skype, I think, or over the phone at the time. And during the conversation, you're like, "Oh, hey, they're showing up."
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, hey. It was like you were just we were both really excited at how quick it was.
And of course, if you, as you would expect, you go into your home directory and it makes an AeroFS folder. So this is a little bit more like the Dropbox, whereas with Bittorrent Sync, you can sync any folder you want. AeroFS, it's a bit more contained, but there's pros and cons to that. And we, I just tossed in a little JPEG image just for us to Ronald McDonald in the cop car. I just thought that was particularly funny.
That's awesome.
But
all SoundCloud.
We were using it to that. So all of the Linux Fest Northwest clips that we played in the last 2 episodes of Linux Action Show were all synced using AeroFS. And then we've experimented with Bittorrent Sync too for other things, but it worked really well. Also, it's free. Where they make their money, I don't know where Bittorrent Sync's going to make their money, but where AeroFS makes their money is in this team collaboration. Like I think here, if I go into my
that seems to be team collaboration and just basically enterprise needs in general, larger number of users, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Like if you want to up it to I think that's what it was, Matt. If you wanted to up it to like 10 or more for your team, then you start paying or something like that. It's pretty
something
reasonable.
real reasonable.
Yeah, yeah. And again, you're not paying for the storage aspect of it.
Oh.
So, anyways, AeroFS, I like the integration. It works, it works swell with my Unity desktop or any desktop that does the
it did great did great on KDE. I had no complaints. One thing I did find is now on your Ubuntu experience, did you get a Nautilus right click action that you could send stuff to or anything like that?
I don't know. Let me see.
Because I did not have any of that action going on.
Oh, I don't. No, you're right. Yeah. That would be nice.
Okay.
Because Dropbox can do that.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a super simple way to script that, I would imagine.
Yeah, it might be.
But there would be. But outside of that, I was really happy with it.
Yeah, I guess a little Nautilus integration would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
A little Dolphin too. A little Dolphin integration.
But now looking at the two, if you were only going to pick one to totally replace Dropbox, which would you go with?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay. If I had to replace Dropbox today and I needed to use this, in my particular case, geeks and non-geeks, boy, if it's going to be one central folder, I'm almost tempted to say I'd probably use the BitTorrent option.
Yeah.
And my reasoning for that is just because the more I think about it, it's like, quite honestly, set it and forget it.
You never have to worry about the service going down.
2 or 3 people using it or whatever. It's just
it's completely off the record. Although I believe AeroFS would be completely off the record too. I'm not.
It probably would. Yeah. No, I'm sure both. I'm sure both would. Now that being said, I don't know. I mean, I might have to beta test both a little bit more, but I don't know. With geeks, I'd do either one.
Yeah.
I do like. Now that being said, in Linux, I do like having the little applet there at the bottom, so I can see what's going on.
I think BitTorrent's going to add that though.
And then once they do, then that puts them on a pretty even keel, except for the speed difference.
And mobile apps. No mobile app for BitTorrent Sync. And
that's true.
And what's neat. So what's nice about the AeroFS app is not only is it pretty nice, pretty well designed, the AeroFS app for Android. I think I don't know if there is one for iOS, but it's also directly communicating with my desktop. So it's not going through the AeroFS. I mean, again, it proxies the initial connection, but then once they establish the connection, I'm pulling these files directly from my desktop. In fact, it even says connecting to your computer on here. And then I have everything that's there. And what's great is other programs on my Android system now have the capability to share to my AeroFS folder, just like I do with Dropbox.
That's not bad.
And
I might use that more. I guess for myself, I don't
if you need mobile, I think that's a huge thing because the Dropbox sync doesn't offer that.
Right.
Or, I'm sorry, the Bittorrent sync.
Okay.
So I think that's maybe a killer.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, it's I don't, for my phone stuff, I don't use a lot. I don't do a lot of go-between between my desktop, except for occasionally.
Yeah.
Dropbox is enough for that on occasion, but it's so rare for myself that, unless it's just to an SD card or something like that. I don't know. I might have to look into it, but for myself, the mobile aspect of it's not. I'm just not there yet. So for me, I probably wouldn't be as big a deal.
I think for me, it's BitTorrent Sync because the shared secret aspect where there's already websites popping up like, here's the secret, and I've put a bunch of public works books in here, and you add the secret, and they'll just download to your folder, and I will add more later on. And people can collaboratively add new public works to that directory, and they just show up on my system. That's fun. Obviously, it's prone to griefing too, but I like that idea and that.
That's true. That's definitely awesome.
Or like if I could subscribe to the Ubuntu ISO's final directory, where every snapshot of an Ubuntu final ISO gets put in this directory, and it just automatically torrents up when it hits that folder, and that's all you have to do. And I'm subscribed to that folder, and once every 6 months, I automatically have a new ISO when I wake up in the morning. That kind of thing could be compelling.
That would be. Now, that's an interesting idea. Magazine subscription, digital magazine subscriptions, music, movie, indie movies.
Right.
Podcasts.
Really. Yeah, absolutely. So both are very compelling applications. AeroFS is also free, but not open source. There's other things out there like SparkleShare that we'll be looking at in the future, but both Matt and I had gotten our hands on these, and we decided we had to talk about them on the show. We'll have links to both AeroFS and BitTorrent Sync in the show notes. All right, Matt, I think it's time to go wrap it up. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But Matt, before we get out of here, I thought maybe we'd read some emails. What do you think?
Definitely.
And some subreddit comments. All right, first one is on the subreddit, came from Cajun Machine. And he says, I've been an avid Firefox user for a long while, tolerating all of the viscosities from Firefox for many years. Recently, I jumped ship to Chromium, the open source version of Google Chrome. It says both Chromium and Firefox are open source. I can't really see any issues with using Chromium, but there is something I've missed. Is there some compelling reason, technical, moral, etc., for using Firefox instead of Chromium? And I highlighted this because it's interesting. We've been getting this feedback in on Coda Radio, so much so that Michael Dominic, the co-host of Coda Radio with me, has taken the Firefox challenge, and he's switching back from Chrome to Firefox.
Oh, wow.
We've been getting a lot over there too, and I'm wondering, Matt, is this something that even crosses your mind, or are you a Chromium user?
I know there are differences. I'm not familiar enough with them to speak intelligently on it, but I can tell you that I don't care. I mean, for me, it's functionality. I'm not downloading state secrets. I'm not, surfing something, bad.
Yeah.
So it's like, who cares? I'm not that worried about it. And if I was worried about it, then I would use a browser that dealt with that. But I use Chromium for the extension functionality, quite frankly. I mean, the add-ons. I know that those add-ons are going to work consistently.
Yeah,
so it's about the user experience for me.
I thought Michael in the subreddit, in the discussion thread that ensued after he asked that question, had a good point. He says Firefox is actually much lower resource intensive, so it's the best option for low hardware machines. Google Chrome starts and consistently runs at 800 plus megabytes of memory and occasionally gets up to 900 megabytes or more. Whereas Firefox starts at 200 megabytes and then stays steady around 400 megabytes for about 90% of its use. I have it running all day, and it usually takes about 12 hours for it to get up to the level Chrome just starts at. So yeah, maybe Firefox has a memory issue, but it takes 12 hours to get where Chromium starts. I don't really see it as a problem. That's an interesting.
I mean, if you have a machine where such a thing is an issue.
Yeah.
I don't, but if I did, I guess that would matter to me.
Russian chick also, I just going based on when I read his nick there, says from a philosophical standpoint, Mozilla supports open standards and an open web, and they build Firefox accordingly. Google is more concerned about getting their products to be awesome in the browser than sticking with web standards.
True. I wouldn't go quite that far. I might say a better comparison would be, embracing open standards and embracing an open environment, an open ecosystem where Google's more concerned about turning a profit in general and having control of data. That would be more my interpretation of it. I don't think that Google's necessarily open web standards. I think it's controlling data, not controlling data. I think those are the real two differentials between the two.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think sometimes Google makes decisions. Like, for example, we're going to ship H.264. Oh, now we're only shipping at WebM support in the browser.
Yeah.
That's a one that's that's a craw in my side. I admit it. I admit it. But I felt like a move that was really for the web. I mean, for Google and not for the web. But a lot of times, I think Google makes choices that are good for the web and good for Google. And a lot of times, everybody wins. But every now and then, it seems like there's choices they make that are really in the best interest of Google. And it does seem like Mozilla doesn't have that conflict.
Although Mozilla is an interesting situation because you have Mozilla Foundation. At least last time I checked, I don't know what they're at now, but last time I really looked at them, they had the Mozilla Foundation, the Mozilla company, the corporation, the for-profit.
Yeah, where do they make most of their money from?
And it's like, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of, Google gets a lot of grief for their tax shelters and their finagling and whatnot. And I get that. I mean, I totally get where they're coming from. But at the same time, don't tell me Mozilla's not doing the same thing. I mean, come on. Granted, I mean, yes, they're pure of heart. Their org is pure. I have no question of that at all. But I'm not totally convinced that there's not still
like the new video codec that's all based on a JavaScript player. That is, is that for the web or is that to give Firefox, if everybody adopts it, an equal footing in that? I don't know for sure. Right. You watch it and find out. But it's an interesting discussion that's been coming up a lot recently. So I kind of wanted to air it and get some people to chime in on that out there in the community.
Sure.
If they're so
interested. Absolutely.
All right, Matt. Next email comes from Andrew. He says, "Hey guys, I know you've reviewed Proxmox before on the show, but I can't remember if you reviewed the awesome integration with turnkey Linux for containers. I've been able to deploy LAMP servers, Sugar CRM, full Ubuntu servers, etc., in a matter of minutes. Just go to their list of appliances, download it, and create a container. Select the appliance, press play, and in a few seconds, it's running. Proxmox rocks." Oh, and JB comes in a close second. I wanted to highlight that because, just a reminder, if you're new to the show, we did a review of Proxmox, and we brought some guys on who've been working with Proxmox for a couple of years in their enterprise. Touched on the turnkey containers, but just briefly. And it is, their appliances. You download it, and say you want a Zimbra server, you download the Zimbra image, you load it on your Proxmox storage, and you hit start, and you enter in a few answers, and you've got a Zimbra server. It's just, boom, it's ready to go. So, yeah, Proxmox is awesome. I agree.
And it rocks.
Go watch our episode if you haven't seen it yet. All right, second to last email for the day comes from William Seaman. And he's the developer of ServeStream, my Android pick last week. He says, "Hello, my name is William, and I am a developer of ServeStream." Hey, just covered that. "I would like to thank you for reviewing ServeStream on the Linux Action Show and for your kind comments about the app. The review touched on ServeStream's size." I did kind of just mention it, which was about 5 megabytes. "And I figured it was worthwhile to explain why the application is slightly larger than some of its counterparts. The application uses FFmpeg in order to play streams in formats that aren't supported natively by Android and to retrieve the metadata," which is, I noticed he was getting the album art of streams, and I was wondering how he did that. "Also not supported by Android's APIs. Although I do strive to keep the application well below 6 megabytes, FFmpeg makes up for about 80% of the application's size. But it's also what sets the application apart from other apps like Stream Furious. It's an unfortunate catch-22 where I have to trade size for functionality. I hope this explanation sheds some light on the application's size. Once again, thanks for reviewing ServeStream and keep up the good work. Regards, William."
I think they made a good call. I mean,
absolutely.
To most end users, at least any that are paying attention, does it work, does it not work? It matters a hell of a lot more than how big it is.
5-6 megs is not really that big of a deal. I was just commenting because I happened to notice it. I don't know if I was installing over 3G or whatever, made it jump out compared to, like you mentioned, Stream Furious. However, the fact that it's using FFmpeg, that's awesome. And it explains why it was pulling down the album art and why it seemed to perform a little better than Stream Furious did. As soon as I read that, it started clicking why it was a better app than all of the other stuff. Right. I think that was a good call. I totally agree. All right. Last email of the day. And I want to get the chat room's opinion on this because I think I know what you and I are going to say. It comes from Josh. He says, I've been using Linux for a while, hopping from distro to distro. I can work my way around the command line decently, but I am by no means an expert. Lately, I've gotten the desire to start using a distribution to learn more about the inner workings of a modern Linux system. What would be a good Linux distro to try out? He wants to learn from the inside out, Matt.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming, I guess it depends server or desktop. If you're going desktop, I don't know, Arch, Gentoo, one of those guys. If you're wanting to learn server stuff, I always say CentOS, because that's kind of where people end up.
A lot of Arch in the chat room. A lot of Slackware, too.
But I think for desktop, Arch, absolutely. No one's going to run a server on Arch. I'm sorry.
What about Gentoo?
On Gentoo, both are adorable, but they're not. You're not seriously. If you're going to, I mean, and I'm sure, I'm speaking to this based on opinion, where you can speak on this on fact. But my opinion and my understanding is that you're not going to take Arch or Gentoo and necessarily go into the server space with it. You're not going to go and sell your services and your things of that sort.
You could, but it's probably not a good idea. Yeah,
sounds kind of painful.
Yeah,
to me. Yeah, but because I mean that's it's bleeding edge versus uber stable.
Right.
So but if you want to learn desktop stuff, I think Arch is a great choice.
Yeah,
Arch is cool.
I would say Arch, unless you want to learn a little more about building software and use flags and all of that, then Gentoo.
That's why I said Gentoo. It's like how hardcore do you want to go?
I'm going to be controversial though. I'm going to say no Linux from scratch. And the reason is because I think one of the key things that helped me with Gentoo and with Arch is there is a special kind of community around both of those distributions that no other distro has, and they certain elements of them, not all, but certain elements of them appreciate the barrier of entry, so they're very willing to help. The documentation is very good, and in fact, in the case of Gentoo, I don't know about Arch, but in the case of Gentoo, their documentation is so good that sometimes when I'm working on other distros and I just want to remember the command that I used, I go look at the Gentoo docs.
I agree completely on that one.
So, but if building the software isn't so important to you and you just want to play with a lot of different packages, you want to interchange system components, mix and match, and see what kind of results you get, I agree with Matt. Arch is probably the way to go.
That's my take for sure.
A lot of the people in the chat room were recommending Slackware too, which I didn't even think about, but that might be a way to go too. Sort of a little more middle ground.
Slackware's, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, that could be fun.
Go back and, there's probably some historical influences on the Slackware distribution that maybe a new user could appreciate. I don't know.
A little whack with Slack, that works.
Yeah, a little whack with Slack. All right, if you want to get your email into the show, you can email linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com or hit that contact link that we have at the very top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. Or the best thing you can do, start a thread in our subreddit over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com. Hey, Matt. Throughout the week, what can people check on what you're doing? What have you been up to?
As always, you can find me at datamation.com. Scroll down to open source, and you'll find me there. Otherwise, you can find me at facebook.com. And, of course, my little handle guy is Hartley Public.
Nice. Matt Hartley Public, or? Yeah.
Matt Hartley, I think so. That's versus Public Hartley.
Linked in the show notes.
Another argument.
It's why if it's not linked in the show notes, you should put it in the show notes because
I'm sure it is. Yeah, I'm sure it's both there.
Okay. My profile's in there too, and I if you want to get a hold of me throughout the week, just tweet me if you're on the tweeters, because that's easy way for me to manage. Hey, look, I got something I want to plug. This is kind of fun. So you know about our Plan B podcast, the podcast all about Bitcoin, and we kind of take a pragmatic look at Bitcoin and the future of Bitcoin and discuss it. And we've got shop talk in there, and we've also got stuff in there for noobs. We just covered mining last week, so if you've considered alt currency mining or Bitcoin mining, listen to our show first. I don't want to say I'm going to discourage you, but there's a few things you need to know about. Right. Here's what's really cool. So we do Plan B on Tuesdays, and we do it at 2 p.m. Pacific. Next Tuesday, Kashmir Hill from Forbes magazine will be joining us to discuss her week on living on Bitcoin. She put all of her credit cards and her cash and her wallet in the freezer for a week and said, I can't use it. She actually ended up having to move out of her apartment because of her landlord not accepting Bitcoin.
Wow.
It's a very interesting story.
That's commitment. Yeah. She did this for the story.
Yeah, so we chatted. We'll be chatting with her in Plan B episode 6, which will be live on Tuesdays if you'd like to join us for that. All right, Matt. Well, that's it. I think that's everything we've got for the Linux Action Show this week. Don't forget, we're live on Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv, and then available for download a few hours after that. And we always appreciate if you share the word about the big show, either rate it in iTunes if you're one of those few, or give it a thumbs up on YouTube or wherever you happen to watch us, or just send a link to a friend. It helps spread the word, and we really appreciate that. All right, Matt. I think we're all done.
Alrighty.
Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. We'll see you right back here next week.
No one likes it when the crap.
Nobody likes it.
Girls in spandex.
Now I'm getting to use Firefox. Crap. I know.